I am Jill Cummings. This is summaries of my interviews of child assessment for 294. Under the health category, I interviewed a speech therapist, Mrs. Brenda Wagner. She works at Margaret R. Brown Elementary School in Seymour, Indiana. I performed the interview on February 8, 2010. Mrs. Wagner used to screen all kindergartners at the beginning of the school year. Since Indiana has had an education budget cut, now she only screens children that are referred by the teacher. She then contacts the parent for permission for the assessment and then assesses the child and then has a follow-up meeting with the teacher, herself, the parents, and the principal for intervention purposes. Mrs. Wagner likes to meet with the child upon referral before the assessment to play games and get acquainted with the child, which makes the child more comfortable. When they are ready to assess the next time, she uses the Goldman-Fristow articulation tool. She also uses the Peabody picture and vocabulary tool. These do not assess for pronoun and verb usage, but basic language skills. She feels that both tests are easy for the child to understand and are easy for her to administer and score. When I asked her if play had a role in the assessment process, she said no. However, in the weekly lessons, play does have a role. She makes up her own games on the particular subject that the child needs to work on, the particular words and verb usage, and she also has computer speech games. I learned that the R sound is the last to develop. This can be as late as 8 years or the 3rd grade. She informed me that each child is different and will develop speech at different rates. The person I chose to interview for infant-toddler assessment was Heather Depew. She is the administrator at Central Christian Daycare Ministry. I performed this interview on March 9, 2010. When I asked her what tool she used, she told me to dial 3. This was interesting because I was soon going to be able to learn about the dial 3 in CFS 294. She thinks that this tool is the best as far as understanding to administer and to get tested. She thinks the 3 areas that it tests are very important. She likes to do the motor test first because it got the kids moving and not so focused on answering questions correctly. Before administering the test, she would interact and play with the children to let them loosen up and adapt to her before administering the assessment. She felt like this would result in a more accurate score for the child because they were more comfortable with her. I asked her how often they do assessments, and she said once a year, at the beginning of the year when the child comes. They wait a couple weeks so the child gets comfortable to the setting. They keep staff on hand that is able to do the assessments to do them annually. They do not do all of the kids at the same time of year. The administrator there felt like this was less stress on the child and the staff. They also do assessments casually once a month. These are not as formal. They play the same game with 5 children in a group with 1 adult. They felt that this would increase every few times and get harder and harder to assess how the child's development is to keep it age appropriate. No employees here at this setting had foreign language. They felt that this got difficult because they had to refer the children and the parents to get assessed somewhere else, but they couldn't understand them whenever that's what they meant, and then they would maybe get angry and difficult and wouldn't understand to know that that's what they needed to do in order to help the child. For the kindergarten and preschool assessment, I interviewed Mary Smith. She works at Margaret R. Brown Elementary School in Seymour, Indiana. I performed this interview on February 5, 2010. She is a special education coordinator at the elementary school. She used to be a kindergarten teacher. When I asked her how she gets kids to be assessed, she says from teacher referral from the 2 kindergarten teachers there at Brown School, from the special education preschool at Jackson Elementary, which is another school in the corporation, from the Head Start at Jackson, and from First Steps in Jackson County. I asked her what tool she used, and she uses the Brigant System tool. This tests for overall readiness and math goals. She says it is the easiest for the child and it is age appropriate. It makes the child feel like they are playing a game. Once she assesses, she meets with the parents, the teacher, and the principal. They discuss long-term and short-term goals, maybe the need for diagnostic testing, and maybe special ed placement after the diagnostic testing, and therapy. For the parent with a child that has been formally assessed, I interviewed Cindy and Greg Hunt. For the confidentiality of their son, I will refer to him as Billy. They knew ever since Billy was born that he had something special about him. He was always so tense and had little to no control of his limbs. They had taken him to doctor checkups after doctor checkups to see about a disability. Some doctors had given them answers they did not like or that were way off, so they waited until he was of better age to be assessed. The first assessment was when Billy started the first grade. Cindy and Greg were not asked to be there before, during, or after. They did not even know that it took place until 3 days afterwards. The psychologist at the school performed the assessment. She took Billy in the hallway right outside the classroom and sat at a table for 2 hours to do the assessment. Cindy and Greg were very disappointed in this. The results deemed that Billy had no brain function and was severely handicapped. The tool that the psychologist used was the Denver. Cindy and Greg did not know much about this because they were not informed, except the fact that it was the Denver. They told me that the results of this assessment did not affect any interactions they had with family or friends. The family could tell a difference in Cindy and Greg because of the results, but it had no effect on the family. They were just devastated. They put the results away and have not looked at them since. Cindy and Greg decided to send Billy to a regular classroom because they believed the assessment was not true. Because at home, Billy would interact with them and he would talk and he could read certain sentences, but no one at school would believe this because of what the assessment had said and because of what his developed IEP had said. For Greg and Cindy, this was a very hurtful outcome, and they have been ruined on assessments ever since then. But when he was a junior in high school, they had him reassessed for guardian purposes, and it was a much better experience. They took the results and put them up as well because to them, Billy was Billy, and it was in God's hands. This video was created for CFS 294 at Western Kentucky University, spring semester 2010. I would like to thank the following sources and professionals.